Welcome to More Than a Therapy Couch, the podcast where we go beyond the walls of traditional therapy sessions. I'm your host, Tianna. In a world that's constantly changing, so are the ways we navigate our mental and emotional health. We're here to embrace the notion that healing and growth extend far beyond the walls of the therapy room. Throughout this podcast, we'll be joined by a diverse array of experts and everyday individuals with compelling stories to help bring awareness to whatever you may be facing. Today, we're talking about the time of year when we are feeling the urge to reinvent ourselves. So, why do so many of us feel compelled to start fresh in January? Today, we're diving into the new year, new me mindset and discussing ways to create meaningful, sustainable routines without burning out. Together, we'll explore setting realistic goals, building lasting habits, and finding balance. So grab your emotional support water bottle, find a comfy spot, and join us as we embark on a journey that goes more than a therapy couch. Let the session begin. So today we are sitting down with Grace Caputo. She is a licensed therapist who has a ton of experience just working with all types of clients, young adults, couples, families, and we're very excited to see her insight on building routines. So Grace, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Tianna.
As a reminder, the topics discussed are for educational purposes only and are not meant to be taken as clinical advice. If you are concerned about you or a loved one's mental health, consult a mental health professional or call SAMHSA's 24-hour hotline at 1-800-662-HELP. So for the listeners, can you just tell them a little bit about your background, how you kind of got into the counseling field, and where your areas of expertise are?
Sure. So I think ever since I was in high school, I always knew I wanted to do this. I love helping people. I love talking to people. So it just seemed like the right fit. I've been working in the field for, I don't even know how many years at this point, maybe 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. And I have my LPC, so I'm a licensed professional counselor, and my LCADC, which is a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Or some of the things that we're going to kind of go over today is why do we feel the urge to change everything in January, and kind of just go over creating realistic goals, building lasting routines, and of course trying to make sure we avoid burnout, because people start at the beginning of the year and they're like, okay, we're going to start this, we're going to do this, and it's going to be great. And then you get to the second week of January and it's like, okay.
We totally get ahead of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, how did that routine? We're going to eat healthy the new year. We're going to go to the gym every day. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And it's like, okay, that's really overwhelming to go from stuffing your face during the holidays, because I know I do that, to then January 1st being like,
fresh
right.
start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's definitely a very interesting balance that we all kind of have to go through. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask you was, what is about the new year that makes us feel so motivated to set really big goals?
I think it's just that societal norm. We think about January and we're ready to set a goal for ourselves. You see it all over social media. Our friends are talking about it, our families. And it is that new year, new me mentality. Mm-hmm. And in January, I think there is that notion of things feeling shiny and new. And so we feel a little bit more inspired during that time of year. But realistically, you can do that any time of year.
Mm-hmm. It just seems like it's oh, well, it's a fresh start, quote unquote. But who's saying you can't have a fresh start at the beginning of the month or on a random Tuesday? No one's saying that you can't do that. Mm-hmm. And what are some of the benefits and risks of this new year, new me mindset?
So I think some of the benefits are that, it gives you the opportunity to self-reflect. We all need to look at ourselves and ask, what do I want to change? And how do I want to feel at the start of a new year, mm-hmm. or any time of year, like we said. But I think some of the risks are that we get ahead of ourselves and we're not setting attainable goals. We think about all those things that you listed earlier, go to the gym, eat healthier, dry January, whatever it is. And we're packing all this stuff into our schedules, but we don't think about everything else that's already our responsibility. So it's a good time to self-reflect.
Absolutely. And this is, I think, one of the main struggles that a lot of people deal with when they start this new year, new me mindset, is people losing momentum after the first couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually really interesting. I was doing some research on this, mm-hmm. and there is this day called Quitter's Day.
Really?
That we've identified. Yes. So typically it's day 19 of January where people they quit on their goals. On average, between the first 2 or 3 weeks is when people start to lose their stride, their motivation. But I found that really interesting.
So I think that is really interesting just because like they say to form a habit, you need to do it for 21 days.
Yes.
So it's so ironic that you're saying day 19 in January and it's like you're
so
almost
close.
there. Like you did the majority, like more than 3/4 of the work.
Yes.
And for you to then get to that point, that's so interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's such a cool topic to talk about because being that I worked in addictions before, when you think of almost any addictions treatment facility, you're doing 21 days or more of rehab, right? Same goes for any of our goals or routines that we're trying to build for ourselves. You know, anything that we start, like we have to give it at least those 19 days to feel like we are moving forward. But I think the challenge is at day 19, are we seeing any changes, right? Do we look any different? Just like depending on what the goal is, we might not see what we're looking for just yet.
You're like, oh, I've been working out every single day at the beginning of this year, and why haven't I seen the results yet?
Yeah.
Specifically with like working out, you may not physically see results during that time, but I know for me, feel the results more.
Yeah,
I think society in general is just very conditioned to like look on the outside with certain things, and they don't really reflect on how they feel on the inside.
Yeah, especially when we are so fixated on social media and how everybody else is looking, you know, that picture perfect moment of someone's day. We're comparing ourselves to that. So yeah, it is interesting. And we live in a society that's like fast. We want what we want and we want it right now.
I don't want to wait online for that long. It's taking too long.
Yeah, like if you could order something from Amazon or the regular store, you would order it from Amazon because you want those results right away. And I think people get frustrated when they don't feel that. And that's when they start to just like,
get
backslide.
discouraged and end up losing that momentum. I feel like a lot of people we talked about obviously like new year, new me mindset. It's very different between having like a New Year's resolution and a new year like routine. Can you like explain to us a little bit the difference between the two?
Totally. So when we think about a New Year's resolution, if you look up the definition, it is a firm decision to start or stop something.
Wow.
That is so rigid. I
Like,
already
you
feel
have to do
myself
this.
constricting. Yes. Yeah. When we think about a routine, there's so much more room for flexibility, for leniency. You can build a routine, right? You set a resolution. That's different. Do you feel the difference there?
It's definitely a lot more tense.
Totally. And like, you know something? I think it's also interesting how when you set a resolution, if you skip a day, it's almost like you get, or I don't know if you've ever done like one of those workout programs that come with a calendar, you're crossing every day off. The moment you hit that day that you didn't do it,
You're like, oh my God.
the calendar is ruined. My track is ruined. Even with clean time, you know, like if I have a slip, right, my recovery is ruined, you know, like it's that all or nothing thinking that we get into. So I think routines kind of give us that openness and that ability to just like change our minds every day. Like wake up, check in with yourself. And even if you think about what you're setting out to do, that's a win, right? Like you don't go for the walk, you don't do the workout, but you thought about it. Okay, it's still on my mind. That neuroplasticity in your brain, you're still making changes to the way that you're thinking. It's not all gone.
Absolutely. And you have to build those new neurotransmitters to build those happy thoughts. Those negative thoughts aren't going to go away from one day to the next.
Yeah, self-talk plays a big role.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that. It's something I was talking about with a couple friends recently where they were saying something and they were like, yeah, but like, I don't know. I can't believe I'm doing that. And it's just not what my parents wanted me to do. And I kind of was just like, well, who's saying that? I'm like, you're being so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
But you don't realize that like how you grew up and who was your influence and who raised you, they become your inner voice.
Totally.
And as you get older, you have to do a lot of detachment from that to be kinder to yourself, because no one's like, we all think, oh, we're supposed to do this, we're supposed to do that. No one's saying that we need to actually be doing these things.
Yeah. And it might not even be a task that we're committing to in the new year. I think when we have a resolution, we're like, there's these concrete goals that we have to hit. But when you think of a routine, like you can set an intention for yourself. I think that's a better way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Rather than going into that lack mentality of what's wrong with me? What do I need to change? What could I be better at? Think to yourself, like, what is the intention I want to set for myself this year? How do I want to feel? What does that look like? Yeah. And like, what is going to get me to that feeling? Because you can start to really envision that for yourself. And all of a sudden, the energy behind that, you feel it. And that pushes you forward.
You're like, oh, I didn't really feel that good today, but I felt really good yesterday. What did I do yesterday that made me feel so good? Oh,
Yes.
I woke up early. I did my morning walk. I meal prepped at home. Like, those are all little things. And I think even too, just people think about, okay, well, now I need to build a routine. Where do I even go from there, from building it? And it can look very, very different for different people. One thing that I found very beneficial, because I feel like sometimes I have a lot of things in my head and it's like overwhelming. It's like, where do I even begin? I read this new thing recently, and they said, you know, you use ChatGPT for ideas at work and stuff like that. Why don't you use it on your day to day? I've been using it for recipes. I've used it for a routine. I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm like, I want to make sure I'm including this.
Yeah.
Help me make this.
Yeah.
And it just don't work. I always say,
Don't work so hard.
Like, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah. I shouldn't say don't work so hard, but like, yeah, like take the load off, relax a little bit, right? It should be fun. A routine should feel good. It should be something you turn to at the end of a long day and you want to do that thing. And that's the thing, like, you know, staying on track with a routine requires not only like that physical commitment to it, but I think it needs to support you mentally. Otherwise, like, you might not get out of bed to do that thing. So you have to be really specific about what it looks like for yourself.
Absolutely. So I know we kind of touched on this a bit. So routines definitely tend to be more sustainable than resolutions. But is there like a specific reason in terms of like in the long run as to kind of why?
I think it's because it is buildable. You know, like if you think of a goal that you have for the new year, and that's at the very top of a ladder. If you removed all the rungs of that ladder and you had to jump to that top part, you would get really exhausted really quick and you'd probably give up. And it wouldn't feel worth it.
Absolutely.
But with a routine, you're looking at that top rung of like, okay, this is where I want to be in for this year. Like 2025, we're setting a resolution or a routine, right? But ultimately, like that might not happen until 2026. So how do I want to feel at the end of this new year? That's at the top rung of the ladder. Then you have to think, okay, what is going to support me? What are the tasks that I want to do to lead up to that point? And each rung represents one of those tasks. But you have to break it down. Like you have to really think about, I'm going to have to wake up at this time. And you might set a time for that every day. That's also really helpful. You know, making it measurable for yourself, setting aside time for it, and making that promise to yourself. That's easier said than done.
It definitely is. For me, one of the things that definitely has helped is making that morning routine, and also not waking up and immediately grabbing your phone. There was actually a therapist that came on one of our last episodes, and she told me that she gives herself hard boundaries with this. I will say that. She gives herself 20 minutes a day on social media. She does not have social media on her phone.
I've tried that. It's really hard.
She only has it on her iPad. And she says the only time that she will go on social media is when she has her morning cup of coffee during her morning routine, and she scrolls. And then after she's done with her cup of coffee in that 20 minutes, she closes everything and she goes about with the rest of her morning routine.
Exactly.
And I haven't tried it yet, but hey,
yeah.
if anyone else wants to try it, I think it's a really good idea. And I think it's great to have like physically put that boundary of, no, it's not going to be on my cell phone. It's not going to be that accessible. Because then it gives you time to do the things that you really want to do or really explore the things that like you may want to learn about yourself.
Number one excuse is I don't have time. I don't have enough time. I hear my clients say it all the time, and I say it all the time too. So there is no judgment here. Like, they know I'm right there with you. Like, if you don't have the time, I encourage you to take a look at your screen time.
Yep.
Because I know for myself, even between, apps and music and podcasts and everything that I do throughout the day, even like if you narrow it down to like emails, texts, everything, I probably spend like 4 hours on my phone or more. That's a lot of time. Think of what we can accomplish if we just like put that to the side. That could be the goal for the year. What happens when you put your social media to the side for a year? Where are you in a year from now? What does it look like? How do you feel? That's crazy.
During this time, people may say, oh, well, I want to look like this, or I want my life to look like this. It's very, very important to think about how you feel, because you may look at, oh, well, I want the life of like an influencer, or I want a life of this person or that person. And it's like, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors, and you don't know how they actually feel.
It's, you're so right. Like, we have to look away from the aesthetics of things, because that's just not real life, right?
We forget about it.
Yeah. Even in here right now, like, there are really great lights. I can't even imagine how long this took you to set up, right? Like, but people are going to see this podcast and listen to us talking and think we are just having this like effortless, like, you know what I mean? We're breaking the fourth wall, but like, it's so true. I think that feeling gets lost all the time. How do I want to feel? And
asking yourself that. And I think a lot of people too, if they were kind of told their whole life, like, you wake up, you go to high school, from high school, you go to your after school sports, or you go to your clubs. And then from there you go home and you do your homework. And even in college, you wake up, you go to your classes, maybe you join a couple clubs, you're in a, fraternity, sorority, whatever the case. And then at the end of all of that, then you graduate and it's like, okay, now I'm an adult. I go to work, and now what?
Yeah. And not only that, when you are so stacked during those years of high school and college, sometimes you don't have that chance to feel.
Or even explore who you are and what you like.
And then suddenly you're an adult. You have all this time. What do I do with it? But also, all these feelings are flooding in that you never gave yourself the time to feel before. All these things that happen to you. Like, have you ever had a moment like that where like something from high school just hits you in like in your like, 20s and you're like, why am I feeling this right now? Yeah.
It's because it's a very like go mentality, and just kind of like have to slow it down a bit and take time to like really reflect on like who you are and what you really want. Going off of that, how can listeners start thinking about their goals as part of their daily or weekly routine instead of a one-time achievement? So we talked about like dry January. You get to the end of January, you went the whole month, and it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah, right? So check in with yourself. I tell my clients this all the time. Like, is this goal or is this routine something that is serving you? Are you happy with it? Could you make adjustments? Do you want to add something into it? Do you want to take something away? Maybe at the end of January, you're good. You feel clear and you want to like, enjoy drinks with friends on a couple nights or whatever. And as long as that's appropriate and you can manage that sort of thing, great. I always say, and this is something from addictions too, it's really important to meet yourself where you're at. And for me as a clinician, it's important for me to meet my clients where they're at, right? So if you want something to be sustainable over a long period of time, that requires like waking up every morning and really checking in with yourself. How quickly, like, we'll go to the mirror in the morning and we're doing our hair, we're doing our makeup. I'm speaking for girls right now, or boys, anybody. But like, you're getting ready for the day. But are you really looking at the person in the mirror and checking in? Because you're going to ask everybody else how they're doing. But how are you doing? You know the moment you open your eyes in the morning, if you're going to be crushing it or if you're just like, great. Like, this is just going to be a good, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes you wake up and you feel stuck. Those are the days you have to meet yourself where you're at and adjust your goal a little bit. That might be the day where you just think to yourself, okay, like, I don't know if I have it in me for a walk today, but I'm thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's something else I could do that's more attainable.
Absolutely. And people forget, like, you're able to also treat yourself. Like, you are allowed to have bad days and have crappy days. No one's here saying you need to be happy all the time, 24/7, be the perfect person and have the perfect routine. And no one's saying that. Like, you're allowed to have crappy days. You're allowed to be like, I don't want to do anything or talk to anyone, and I just want to be in bed and watch movies. That's totally fine. Now, but again, check in with yourself. If you notice you've done that 4 days in a row, okay, maybe it's kind of something we should evaluate. But you're allowed that one off day, those 2 off days.
Totally.
You can take that time to process how you're feeling.
And on those off days, you might ask yourself, wow, like if I'm crashing and I feel like I need a whole day to myself to just veg out, what is burning me out right now?
Mm-hmm.
How can I change that moving forward so I don't end up in this place again? You know?
And reflecting on that. So what are you doing on the day-to-day basis? And what are the things that you love about your day-to-day? And what are the things where you're like, I'm
going to scrap that. Yeah.
And asking yourself that too, like any interaction or any situation that you are leaving from. So you go to work on your way home. How did I feel about today? Are you working in a toxic work environment where it's mentally draining? Did you maybe, I don't know, meet up with a friend for dinner? And on the way home, you're like, I don't really know if that was beneficial. They were kind of just like bragging the whole time.
Yeah,
and it's like,
I feel drained.
It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And giving yourself, I think, permission also to like not feel bad for not wanting to do those things anymore.
Yeah, especially as we get older. We don't have as much time. That's valuable. You know, the time we give ourselves is so valuable. And as we get older and older, we have less and less. So it's like making sure you're filling your time with people who are your supports, who are your cheerleaders, who hype you up, that make you feel inspired, right? This is one of my favorite lines. I don't know where it comes from, but I definitely heard it somewhere. It's not mine. But does what you're doing inspire you, or does it tire you?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. So checking in is definitely important.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we are going to take a little bit of a commercial break, and we will be right back after the sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Tree of Life Counseling Center, where people come to heal, deal, and learn to thrive. They currently have immediate availability for talk therapy and medication management with a team of over 50 licensed clinicians. Are you feeling alone? We all can use someone to talk to. Call 732-393-8391 or visit us at www.treeoflifecc.org to start your journey of self-discovery and healing today. All right, and we are back. One of the things that you mentioned with creating a routine is to start small. So when we are starting small, why is this so important when building a new routine?
I think starting small is important because it's attainable and it doesn't make it feel like this chore we're doing. It doesn't feel like work. It's just like something we're like sneakily slipping in to our everyday routine. So, you know, if you think about habit stacking, right, that might mean kind of like what that therapist was saying. During my morning coffee, if I wanted to be more mindful in the new year, while I'm drinking my coffee, which I already do every morning, I'm going to listen to an inspirational talk or a spiritual talk, or maybe I'm going to do a 5-minute meditation, right? And just something as small as that, we can commit to, you know? So that's why it's important to start small.
And how can we prioritize consistency over perfection?
Consistency over perfection. I like to look at this like progress over perfection, right? Like, yes, we can be consistent with our goals, but like you said, some days we do fall short. Or I don't even know if I like calling it falling short. It's like we just need to adjust.
We need to rest.
Yeah, we need to rest. We're tired, you know, you got to take that break. So, you know, when you feel down in the dumps about, oh, I missed a day, add another day on. We're good. It's all good. And keep moving.
Or if even too, like if you feel bad that you didn't go to your workout class or you didn't go on that walk, okay, maybe tomorrow instead of walking for 20 minutes, you walk for a half hour or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Or guess what?
Listen to your body.
If you also feel like you need to skip a day, no one's saying, again, that you can't do that.
Yeah. Yes. And, if you do skip and you feel some sort of regret after, be curious about it. What am I regretting? Is it the fear that I missed out on something? Did I, leave a friend behind and I'm more worried about them than it is about me? Or is it that I know I would have felt better if I did that thing? And great, get back on the horse. You got it.
And I feel like when you recognize that, when you wake up and that alarm's going up at 6 a.m. and you're like, I really don't want to do any of today, it kind of puts a little fire under your butt. Like, oh, you felt really bad yesterday. So do you want to feel like that again? And remind yourself.
You kind of need those moments so that you do have that extra push the next time you want to hit snooze.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love the 3, 2, 1 countdown.
Oh,
just
that's a good one.
You recognize that you're doom scrolling, or you recognize that you're just like laying in bed or keep hitting snooze. It's like, okay, just count down and just get up.
That's it.
Once you're up, you're like, all right, just keep going.
Yeah.
It just keeps flowing.
One thing at a time, and it builds.
And then I know you mentioned earlier habit stacking. Can you just explain a little bit more about that and how that can help us incorporate new habits into our life?
Yeah. So habit stacking basically is adding small new routines into what we already do in our day to day. So like I said, if you're drinking your coffee, what can you add to that? That's something new that you want to bring into your everyday life, whether it's reading a book or being mindful, meditating, whatever it is. How can you add that in? And you're not taking any extra effort than you normally would in that moment, right?
Because it may seem like so much more like, oh my gosh, this is so much for me to do. But driving to work, I'm like, all right, let's try to listen to like morning affirmations and see how that does.
Yeah.
And you just like repeat it to yourself. You're driving to work anyway.
Yeah. Or I love a good personal development podcast. Yeah, which I mean, I guess we kind of are one of them. So yeah, like listening to something like that while you're driving, because like maybe you are in a funk that morning. Maybe you need a little boost. Reach towards those supports. If you can't make that phone call to someone who's going to be there for you, put on somebody that you trust that like is going to bump you up for the day.
Absolutely. And then how often should we like be checking in on ourselves? So we say, okay, we want to start this routine. This is what I want to make sure that I'm implementing. When should we be checking in? When should we really be like reflecting on that new routine that we set?
I mean, this is a commitment too, but like I do love a good journaling at the end of every day. I think a lot of times people think that journaling is only for days where you have heavy emotions and you're just dumping them all out. And that's great. But on your good days, jot down what worked for you or what you're grateful for, right? So like, I think you should check in every day. It doesn't have to be journaling. That could be a big commitment for somebody, but when you put your head on your pillow at night, before you grab your phone, before you put on TV or whatever you do, just check in. How am I feeling? What do I need to adjust?
Absolutely. The more that you're checking in with yourself, the more that you'll be mindful and aware of the certain things that are affecting your like day to day. It can be something so minor. Like I've been doing this lately where I have been getting like really bad road rage. And I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm like, where's...
Yeah.
And I asked myself, I'm like, well, okay, what did that person do that like really... Are you really mad that that person like cut you off or that person was like driving slow? Or are you annoyed that the person in front of you is driving slow and you didn't leave when you were supposed to leave and now you're going to be late and now you have anxiety about that?
Yes.
It's very interesting to bring it to your attention and then explore that. And I think the more that you do that, the more that you become aware and the more that you can be like, okay, well, I don't want this reaction anymore. How can I change that? And if you're not even aware and reflecting on it, you may not notice that you're even doing those things.
Yeah, it really helps you to regulate your emotions. It's a practice. You keep catching yourself and you're like, okay, I don't want to feel this way much longer. So how can we pattern interrupt whatever thoughts are flooding our minds right now? What can I do in this moment? Like, we want to acknowledge the feeling for sure, but what can I do to kind of bring myself back? Music's great for that. Sometimes a song can take you right out of a crappy feeling.
I heard about this earlier this week. One of my friends mentioned like, "Oh, did you ever heard of like a dopamine menu?" And I was like, "What is that?"
Sign me up.
I was like, "What is that?" And she was like, "Well, you make a menu basically. So you have your entree, you have your dinner, you have your dessert, your lunch, and each thing is just something that you can do that brings you happiness. So like your snack may be like a 5-minute grounding technique. Your lunch, maybe you, I don't know, going to get your nails done and getting a facial, like, and breaking those things up and like reflecting it. When you're like feeling really crappy, you grab your dopamine menu and be like, okay, how much time do I have? All right, well, I'm going to grab this from my dessert menu right now and I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And then you implement it. And it's nice that I think sometimes when we're feeling down or just like overwhelmed, we're like, well, where do we even look to feel better? And I think sometimes you end up going back to toxic situations or toxic things that aren't necessarily beneficial for you.
Yeah, we are creatures of habit, right? And that's why routines can be really great for us, because they do become predictable and they can be really soothing and they're healthy, right? But sometimes we do get stuck doing the old things over and over and expecting a different result. And that takes me back to addiction, right? Like, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Absolutely. And I think people don't realize that. So you've been like, you may have been saying, oh, well, next year I'll start, working out, or next year I'll start eating healthier. And then you look back and it's like, oh my gosh, 10 years have gone by.
Yeah. And maybe working out, maybe that's too heavy, right? Like, maybe it's this year I'm going to be more active.
Yep. And working out doesn't mean like you need to go to the gym and lift heavy weights and do, the step master and deadlift and all of these things. It can be you going to Pilates, you going to yoga, you going to like all these different things that you find enjoyable for you.
And that build a community, right? I think that's also really important, right? Having routines that you can reach out to when you need that community support and you just need like social interaction, but also having routines in isolation or like, by yourself. I think a lot of people get really scared of that.
It's like you need like a mixture of both, and it is a balance. And I think sometimes people either do so much of one or so much of the other, where you're like self-isolating and you're like, I don't want to deal with anyone right now. Or like now community is great, but you also want to make sure you're not just distracting yourself from your thoughts and your feelings. You have to reflect back on a lot of those things.
Definitely.
So we are going to take another commercial break, and we will be right back after our sponsor. Feeling stuck mentally and physically? It may be time to supplement your self-care practices with some holistic healing options. Mind the Body Holistic Wellness in Freehold, New Jersey proudly offers a variety of healing modalities, including Reiki, massage therapy, reflexology, and Himalayan hot stone massages. For more information or to book an appointment, visit www.mindthebodyhw.com. Now back to our show. All right, and we are back. So I want to switch over to self-compassion and how that affects our mental health. So what role does self-compassion play when maintaining new habits?
Oh my gosh, it's so important. Because like I said, like, you have to be gentle with yourself. We're starting something new. Even if it's small and attainable, like some days are going to be harder than others. So being gentle with yourself the way you would, like if a friend came to you and said, hey, I'm starting this new thing this year, you would hype them up.
Like, you got this, you're going to do great.
Yes. Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe I'll come with you. Like, I love that for you. Okay. So like if they came to you and they're like, oh man, like I really like messed up. Like I'm not sticking to this like routine. What would you say to encourage them? Like, because our self-talk can be so negative when we start to lose sight of our goals, we just tear ourselves up. We need to start talking to ourselves the way we would someone we really love. you know, and that's where self-compassion comes in.
And how do we manage the pressure of doing it all, but also making sure that we're avoiding burnout?
That is really hard. You know, I think it comes down to asking for help. Some of us are lucky enough to live with other people. If you are starting a new goal and you feel like the laundry's getting in the way and cooking's getting in the way or whatever it might be, ask for some help. You know, you don't want to pile it all onto the other person, but ask for some help or think to yourself, okay, how can I restructure my day so that I can still fit this in with everything else? And that's where setting a time, like a specific time, can be really key, you know, but also recognizing that if I'm making a promise to myself, I got to stick to that. Like, it is so much harder to keep a promise to yourself than to anybody else. Because if you ask me to go to the gym with you tomorrow at 3:00, I'm showing up. Even if I'm like, oh man, I don't have it in me. Like, I'm so tired. This was a long day. It's like, well, Tianna's going to be there, so I'm going to go. Right? That's all it took. I'm showing up for someone else. How can I do that for myself?
Absolutely. And that's something that everyone should like ask themselves that. It may be very hard. You may not know the answer, but trying to incorporate different things that you enjoy that make you feel good to show up for yourself.
Getting really, really, really clear about your why, about your intention. Why am I showing up? So when you set an intention for the new year, a resolution, a routine, whatever you want to call it, write down why you're doing this for yourself. From like your best self energy. I say self energy, like when you feel like your best self, that's your self energy. Come from that place, write it all down so that on your bad days, you can look back on that and remember your why. And if it's strong enough, it's going to keep you going even on the hard days.
And that's where that self-discipline kind of comes in. And it's like, I really don't want to do this, but my why is that I want to feel good, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And I promised myself that I would do this.
Yeah.
All right, let's push through it. And I promise you 9.9999999 times out of 10, you will feel so much better doing the thing that you did not want to do after you finish it.
Yeah. One of my like favorite things to do, especially before I was pregnant, is I would go to hot yoga. I would teach hot yoga. Like, it's a part of my everyday life. And one of the things that I remember reading when I first started teacher training was, I regret going to yoga, said no one ever. And I so relate to that. Like, anytime I ever showed up on my mat, I can't think of one time where I left and I was like, that was stupid.
Like, I shouldn't have gone. Yeah. It never happens.
Never.
You walk out feeling, you're like, that was such a good class. I feel like I'm able to conquer the day. I'm going to go do this now and this now and this now.
Or like, have you ever left doing something like that and you're like, why don't I do this more often? Like, when am I going to get it?
Yep.
You know?
And it's like, this is why I needed that reminder. And like, you forget. And so I think that's so important to be intentional with the things that you want to do in your life, and intentional with placing the things that make you feel good in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important.
And then if for some reason we do feel like we are falling behind or not meeting our expectations, what can we kind of do? So I know you mentioned like being kinder to yourself, or talking to yourself as if, you were giving advice to a friend, but what would be something that we would be able to kind of work on with ourselves?
Yeah. So let's say like you're having a day and you're just not there. Like, you can't show up for yourself. It's one of those days. Reach out to somebody and talk to them about how you feel like you're falling short. Someone who's going to lift you up, someone who's going to support you, remind you of your why. You know, so you might want to clue people in on that. Why is it so important to you? So they can show up for you. Therapy is also a great place to, like, once a week kind of assess where you're at, you know? And, you know, if you feel like you're falling short, you can always adjust. You could always pivot. Sometimes I'm like doing amazing spinning and weight training and all these different things. Well, guess what? I'm pregnant now, and I'm like nearing my 3rd trimester. That's not attainable for me anymore. I love what it did for me, before I was pregnant, leading up to this point. But now, like, okay, like, let's pivot. Let's do prenatal yoga. You can do that. Or let's go to a Pilates studio where they offer pre and postnatal. Like, let's just expand on what we're doing. And it's okay.
It's like this new journey for you that like you're able to try out other things that you wouldn't be doing if you weren't pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just because like you enjoy doing spin class and doing hot yoga and you're not able to do that now, that doesn't mean that you can't find joy in other things too.
Totally. Like, do not close yourself off to the other opportunities and possibilities, because for every goal that we have, there are so many opportunities out there that can support that goal. So look around you. Where are the opportunities? Where do you want to go? How do you want to feel? Who's going to support you? Are there people that you need to introduce into your life that could support you? Or are there people you need to let go of?
That is huge. I think a lot of people don't realize how having certain people in your life that don't align with what you want from life can be really, really, really hard. And you kind of start to, I mean, we've heard this multiple times, who you surround yourself with is who you are. So it's definitely hard to recognize that and realize that.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I definitely wanted us to talk about is what are some like common mistakes that a lot of people make when setting new goals for the new year?
So I think some common mistakes people make is they have the goal, but they don't have the plan, right? And when I say plan, I really do want to lean into that like flexibility and leniency of like, okay, every day, like we can have a new plan as long as we're under that like umbrella of whatever the theme is we want to change, right? Without a plan, like it's like plan ahead or plan to fail.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
setting aside that time like we talked about, that's going to be really important, and getting really clear about what it looks like and being really clear with yourself. Is it attainable? Like, you know, there are so many times that I've thought to myself, I want to work out 5 days a week, every week. It's not realistic with my lifestyle, right? But if I hit the number of 3 and then maybe I push to 4, I feel good. So my attainable goal is I'm going to move my body 3 times a week. Like I'm going to get out and do something active 3 times. I can do that. And then I don't feel discouraged. So being really like, you know, clear about your lifestyle, not anybody else's, and what you want to do and when you want to do it.
And how that even like fits in with your schedule, like when you have the time. And again, it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. If you feel like you don't have the time, then maybe there are certain things you need to cut out of your life so that you do have the time to do the things that you actually want to do.
Yeah. Like that social media, you'll find the time, trust. Like you will find it.
We've talked about like new year, new me. We're all excited. We're feeling this. We're all like motivated. We're like, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to tackle this. It's going to be great. And then you get to the end of January and it's like, oh, okay, so now what? So like, how do people like stay motivated for the rest of the year when that initial excitement is kind of like, oh, all right.
Change it up. Find little changes that you can make. Incorporate some fun. It should feel fun. If it doesn't feel fun,
and it feels like a chore,
we need a new routine. This wasn't it. Okay, that's fine. Find something new that is fun, exciting. If it is something a little bit more, let's say it's like an academic goal. Okay, so like that's not always going to be fun and exciting. But what can you do for yourself? Like that dopamine menu. I'm going to buy my favorite coffee when I'm writing this 26-page paper. Where I'm going to go into a setting where I feel like, oh, okay, at least I'm a part of something and it's a really cool vibe here. I'm going to listen to music if that doesn't distract you, right? So trying to incorporate some sparkle into your everyday.
With what you were saying, one of the things that we talked about on the our last episode is like the intentional debt. So like if you are doing something that you're like, I don't really want to do this, well, what's something that you can do to be intentional and get yourself out of that debt? So buying yourself that coffee, going and get your nails done, going and I don't know, taking a hot bath, like things like that I had a crappy day. I am feeling like this. Okay, well, who's saying that you need to sit in that and just feel crappy and feel shitty?
Yeah.
You can still feel your emotions and get in a nice massage or a nice facial. Who says you can't have both?
Yeah. How do you clear your energy at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm like a woo-woo kind of person, so that's going to look different for me than it is for somebody else who's a lot less woo-woo. But like, even if I had like, you know, a tough talk with somebody, the moment I'm alone, I might like just like jump up and down a little bit and shake it out, you know, or like maybe I get my sage out or like my room spray, or I don't know. There's so many things you could do to clear your energy.
People don't realize that energy and how you are feeling are very, very connected. And other people's intentions and energy plays a huge role on yourself.
Yes.
I'm the type of person that I unfortunately absorb a lot of the energy around me. So with you, it's great because you have a very positive energy.
Yeah.
It's fueling me in a way.
Thank you.
But with other people, definitely you like leave those situations and you're like, oh my gosh, I just feel so drained. That was so much. And think about that and be intentional about where you're placing yourself and the things that you're doing, because you do store all of that in your body.
Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not, or whether you realize it or not, you do it.
Oh, I'm all about that. And like, you know, even as a therapist, you have to kind of acknowledge at the end of a session, like, what am I holding on to? What's mine? What's yours? You know, and we need to do that in our everyday lives.
Absolutely. And in terms of like holding ourselves like accountable and making sure that we're like staying on track, are there like specific strategies or tools that we can use to help us when we are starting our new routines?
Yeah, everyone's different. I know for myself, I'm a planner girl, and I'm not using my iPhone calendar. Like, that doesn't work for me. I like pen and paper. I'm crossing things off. It feels so good. That's my jam. But for other people, like maybe you do use your iPhone calendar, or maybe you have a reminder set in your phone that just kind of like sets the tone. Like, hey, remember how you want to feel today. It doesn't have to be like, go work out right now, you know? And I know we've used that example a lot, but it could be anything that we're working on.
Absolutely. One of the things that I have found very beneficial, I'm the same way. I love like crossing things off.
Yeah.
I have like a wipe off board and a little wipe off board, and it says like to do, and I write down the things that I need to do, and I'm like, okay, I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. That is definitely very helpful. One of the other things I've shared actually with, I think I heard about it from a therapist here. Yeah, I definitely heard about it from a therapist here, and then I started sharing with other people, is there's this app called Finch, Finch.
Yes.
I love Finch.
I've heard of that.
And you take care of a little bird or a little penguin, and how you like grow your penguin is you accomplish things that you set for yourself. So it's definitely really helpful for anyone that's like struggling with depression or just like doing basic things in your day-to-day life. So it's definitely very beneficial, and you feel good still like crossing that off, and then you're like, you know, you can connect with people. I connect with the producer. I got our man B over here on it, and he has Taco and I have Mint, and our guys are friends.
I love that.
And then you get to like show like encouragement things. You could send it to each other. Like,
oh, that's great.
I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, Taco's saying good morning to me. Hey.
Yes.
So you can make it fun. It doesn't need to be like this like dreading
rigid thing. I can't emphasize that enough. Like, that's like when we go back to that word resolution, we don't want it to be a firm decision and rigid and like constricting. Our bodies literally curl up when we feel that way, right?
You feel the hair sticking up, walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
So we are going to just take one more commercial break, and we will be right back. This episode is brought to you by Thomas Sweet Ice Cream and Chocolate. Thomas Sweet is a locally owned business with over 45 years of experience serving custom ice cream creations and delectable chocolates. They are known for their blend-in ice creams, where there are endless options to create your own ice cream treat with customizable topping mix-ins. Stop into the Thomas Sweet Ice Cream Shop located at 183 Nassau Street, Princeton, New Jersey, or contact them at 609-683-8720, or reach them at www.thomassweet.com. Now back to our episode. So we're just getting to the end of our episode. So for this last part, one of the things I think would be beneficial is the listeners to realize that like therapists also go through things. Like therapists are not perfect. They are also human. They also go through the same struggles that y'all go through. So one of the things that we wanted to ask you was, what has been your biggest challenges or successes with New Year's resolutions in the past?
So I wouldn't say that this was like a New Year's resolution challenge, but just like a challenge, an everyday challenge in my life where my routine got rocked, right? So, and this is a tough story for me to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. My brother back in 2020, he was a commercial airline pilot. He had worked like thousands of hours. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but lots of hours. I imagine it was tons of hours training to become a pilot. And one day he called us one night. He was flying a commercial plane. He was a co-pilot, thank God. And something really horrible happened. He had a medical emergency and he was unconscious and they had an emergency land the plane. So this was the middle of COVID, not even the middle, the beginning of COVID, 2020. The emergency landed the plane. They brought him to a hospital in Indiana. My family is from New Jersey. Yeah. So it was a very scary time. And as you remember, like going into a hospital was hard enough. So, and who could be your guests and this and that. And like, if you're flying state to state, they might not even let you in. So he called my mom up that night and he was like, Mom, I don't want you to worry. I was with my mom and my dad and I could just see her face. I'm like, what is going on? Something's really wrong. And he said, I don't want you to worry, but we had to emergency land the plane. Everything's okay, but I have a brain tumor and they have to operate like tonight. Like it has to be removed. It was the size of an orange. Oh, wow. So it was like really scary. And I just remember like, oh my God, it knocked the wind out. It still does. Telling that story just knocks the wind out of me. And thank God the surgery was successful. He landed in the most amazing place that he could have. One of the most, renowned brain surgeons happened to have an opening in Indiana that night. Like it was really crazy how everything aligned and it all worked out. But, it changed my brother's life. Here he was. He worked on this amazing goal. And that, flying was not something he could do anymore after that. But, he still persevered and he works for an airline company and he teaches people how to fly. And it's like, it's so cool. So, so cool. But my world, it was rocked too. And if it weren't for my self-compassion and my self-care and my routines, I don't know how I would have showed up for him the way that I was able to. And I remember the first time I went back to yoga after everything. Like he was finally home with us healing. And I went to yoga and I even felt a little bit of guilt. Like, oh man, like how am I allowed to go do this thing? But like, I felt so at home. I felt so much better. Like, and I think, I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, but yes, therapists get emotional too.
You guys are human.
Yeah.
Me for the listeners, I'm tearing up as well.
Yeah. So the moment I got back on my mat, I was at home and I knew like I was going to be okay. And I knew he was going to be okay.
And I think another thing too that I think a lot of people forget is you said self-compassion, but also like you want to show up and be there for your brother. You need to make sure that you're filling your cup because you can't make sure that you're filling up your brother's cup if your cup is empty.
Yeah. And it's incredible how somebody who's going through like one of the hardest times of their life, like they will tell you, go fill your cup. I hadn't had a massage in my whole life until that time. And he was like, you know what you should do, Grace? Go get a massage. I was like, you want me to get a massage?
Me?
Like,
really? Are you sure?
I wish you could have one.
You should be getting one right now.
Yeah, no, and that's something I do every month, because he encouraged me to do that. And to this day, like all of the strides that he has made, like physically, with radiation, with chemo, like physical therapy, occupational therapy, so much that he had to overcome. He's my why. Because the days that like I can't show up, I think of him and I'm like, oh, I got this.
It'll make me cry.
I know. It's emotional. But like, you know what? Talk about life, right? Like life comes at you fast. And unfortunately, like we're all going to feel some kind of pain or challenge at some point in our life, probably multiple times. But it's how we get back up and it's how we, it's knowing ourselves well enough to know like, what can I turn to in those moments? How can I get back into my routine? Because when I tell you, getting back on my mat was me saying, I got me. And that's the most powerful thing you can do for yourself.
Now, I don't know exactly how you felt in that moment, but one of the other things that I think is really beneficial to kind of reflect on is like your brother went through this and he is not currently able to maybe go and do a workout routine or go and do this and go and do that. And yes, you may have that feeling of guilt, but also like your brother would say, no, go and do that. Like you deserve that. And just because like I may not be able to, like you are able to. And I think a lot of us take sometimes certain things for granted. We don't realize like we can get up and go do a workout class where other people don't have that ability.
Yeah. It's so true. And like he is a great example of somebody who, even though there are a lot of things that he isn't able to do right now, he finds things that he can do. And he lives a full life. He works full time. He's got a beautiful wife. You know, like he does fun. He doesn't let it stop him. We also have to recognize like every day isn't guaranteed the same as it was before. This is why rigidity doesn't work. Being able to change and adjust so that you could still live a happy and a full life, you know, no matter what happens.
And even when you are feeling low, even if you are feeling that, oh man, I didn't do X, Y, and Z that I said I was going to do with my routine, that's okay. If you're still able to go to bed and wake up the next morning, you still have an opportunity to do all of those things.
Yeah, take the opportunity, seize the day, like go for it.
Absolutely. And one of the last questions that we do ask all of our guest speakers is, I don't know if I put this on the list, so I'm sorry if I'm putting on you on the spot. There's been a few times I've done that. But we do love to ask everyone, if you were stuck on an island and you can bring one book with you and why, what book would you bring? Now, if you don't have a book, we do also opt out for an item. If you do have an item that you would bring with you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I do have a book. There's a book that I have read so many different times. The Universe Has Your Back by Gabby Bernstein. I love that book.
What's one thing that you love about it?
It just is it's all about what we talked about today. Like no matter what happens, the universe has your back. And it's so, I don't know, it's spiritual and woo-woo, but it's also, it's not. Like it's just like everyday life. Like how do we navigate that? And how do we feel supported by something bigger than ourselves?
Absolutely. And if you don't believe in like the universe, the higher power, if you believe in God, whatever you believe in.
Yeah, if you just believe in you, then hey, you're your higher power.
Absolutely. But there's definitely so much that we are all capable of. And I'm a very firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And I think, Allison, I think you might have mentioned this on one of the other episodes, but like the art of like redirection. So like if you're experiencing something, you feel a certain way, just redirect it. Like redirect your feelings, redirect your thoughts. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's hard.
Trust me.
It's really hard.
You do not want to see me during that difficult time. Like it's really hard. Life will rock you. Give yourself the time to feel whatever it is that comes up. And that might be days, depending on what you're going through. But don't forget that like you can take care of you. You know?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Grace, for coming on and speaking with us. Tune in to our next episode and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.